Currently, the US and China are in a rivalry that started with trade. We don't know if it'll expand, but one battlefield both sides must control to win is the Middle East. That's why Saudi Arabia is so coveted, like a prize both America and China are competing for. Saudi Arabia has vast oil and natural resources. Lately, we've seen China and Saudi Arabia increasingly partnering, so the US countered with its own offer. They're offering more incentives to Saudi Arabia. Does Saudi like it? Yes, they do. And will Saudi probably accept it? Most likely yes. This mega deal is really grand, truly American style. So when Saudi Arabia saw this deal, knowing full well how desirable they are, they just coyly tucked their hair behind their ear and told America, if you want us to ditch China, we can do that for you. So Biden and Saudi Arabia, specifically MBS, the Saudi Crown Prince, are working on this mega deal. The deal is about getting Saudi Arabia to normalize relations with Israel, meaning to establish peaceful ties between Saudi and Israel. And if Saudi agrees to this deal, they'll get huge rewards, whether it's military security, AI chips, or support in various areas. In addition to trade, there's also nuclear energy involved. But this deal isn't as simple as Saudi just agreeing to it and then peace will automatically happen. For the deal to really come together, two things are needed. First, Israel has to cooperate in stopping the fighting in Gaza, which honestly doesn't seem very likely, or at least not anytime soon, right? Second, Saudi Arabia would have to agree to normalize relations with Israel, and this part actually seems more likely. And if you ask whether the United States would have to be the country to negotiate with Israel to get them to cooperate in bringing peace to the region this time, you'd also have to look at whether the relationship between America and Israel is a bit strained right now. Because the United States has called for a ceasefire, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he won't stop, that even if Israel is isolated, they'll keep fighting. Let's take a look at the interview. All right, let's get back to the U.S. deal. Like I mentioned earlier, the United States and Saudi Arabia have been good allies for a long time, especially back in the days of the Petrodollar system, where they exchanged mutual benefits. America provided Saudi Arabia with military security support in exchange for oil deals in dollars. I'll explain more about that later. But last year, Saudi Arabia actually signed an agreement with the United States to enhance their security cooperation. This allows Saudi Arabia to access both trade, technology, and military science from the United States. But as we know, Middle Eastern countries generally have pretty low security. As we've seen over the past 6 months, there have been constant shootings, battles, and various forms of violence erupting throughout the Middle East. There have been so many incidents for us to witness. Because of this, MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, wants to leverage this opportunity to gain even greater benefits from this mega deal with the United States. MBS wants a guarantee of security from the U.S., a commitment to provide support in every aspect, and he wants it in writing, as a legal document. He wants it to be so binding that even if a new U.S. president takes office, they wouldn't be able to cancel it. He wants a guarantee that if Saudi Arabia faces any problems, the U.S. must provide full military support to help Saudi Arabia, going all out. Saudi Arabia can make these demands because they know they're influential right now, and they're offering the U.S. something in return as well. It's an offer that Saudi Arabia knows has long been on America's wish list. As I mentioned, Saudi Arabia is the big player here. They have the resources. They have a lot of resources, and they're a key battleground. Anyone who wants to win has to have control over it. That's why it's not just America courting Saudi Arabia. China is also trying to woo them. There have been frequent handshakes with Xi Jinping. The relationship between China and Saudi Arabia seems to be going quite smoothly too, because they've signed a local currency swap agreement worth as much as $7 billion. If you convert that to Thai baht, it's about 24.5 billion baht. And why are they exchanging local currencies? It's so they can trade oil between China and Saudi Arabia without having to use the US dollar. In official terms, this is called de-dollarization, which is a big deal for America. This is one of the things that would really make the US nervous, because one of the reasons the US dollar is so strong is that the Petrodollar agreement with Saudi Arabia is basically an exchange of interests. As I mentioned earlier, Saudi Arabia agreed to sell oil only in US dollars in exchange for protection or military assistance. As I said, the Middle East is a region with relatively low stability. So if anyone wants to buy oil, they have to exchange their currency for US dollars. This is what has helped keep the US dollar strong, because the thing that truly holds real value in the world isn't actually money. It's energy, specifically oil. If you tie the US dollar to something that has real value, like oil, then the value of the dollar becomes stronger. But the benefits from this have gradually been declining over time. Recently, for example, JP Morgan even reported that over the past year, global oil trades in US dollars dropped by 20%. This means a fifth of the world no longer uses the dollar for oil, a huge shift. Now, China is partnering with Saudi Arabia to trade oil in local currencies, exchanging up to $7 billion worth. That's the value, but they're using their own money. So how can the US avoid the coming pain? But going back to the small proposals that Saudi Arabia has put forward to the United States, these are just to ask for a little something extra in that mega deal. These demands are simply to ensure that the supply chain for AI chip production runs smoothly. But if Saudi Arabia partners up with China, it puts the US in a tough spot because Saudi is ready to trade. This is the situation. These are the words of Amit Mehta, the CEO of Atlas. The US could only give a faint smile in response and then politely pushed back, saying, well, that's fine, but honestly, Saudi Arabia should really choose whether to use American or Chinese technology. But in this round, all America could do was give a slight, weak smile, because even though it seems like Saudi Arabia is willing to go along with the US, they basically said, hey, we could drop China if America asks us to, but that's just what's on the surface. The real reason is, let's say Saudi Arabia's goal is to compete in trade using AI chips. We have to admit that right now, China's AI chip technology is still at least 2 to 3, maybe even 5 years behind the United States. So if Saudi Arabia wants to compete in trade using AI chips, they have to choose a country with the right technology. AI chips that are number one in the world in order to gain a commercial advantage, which of course means the United States. It's clear that Saudi Arabia stands to benefit, and they made the right choice. But if we turn to look at China, yes, China has been developing AI chips for years now, like Huawei, for example. Huawei still seems to have massive capital, right? If you look back, Huawei's revenue has been consistently strong. 6,700,000 yuan per year. So it's not necessarily a sector that has to rely that heavily on money from Saudi Arabia. But the question is, will Saudi Arabia really turn its back on China? Well, in a capitalist world, everything is based on interests. Let's take a look at this chart first. This chart clearly shows that Saudi Arabia is a major oil supplier. China's number 2. Saudi Arabia sells as much as 86 million tons of oil to China each year. That means China is a key customer for Saudi Arabia. Let's go back and look at what I said here one more time, just in case you missed any details. China and Saudi Arabia have made a currency swap agreement worth as much as 7 billion US dollars. If you convert that to Thai baht, it's about 245 billion baht. But why do they exchange local currencies? They swap local currencies so they can trade oil between China and Saudi Arabia without having to use US dollars. Or to use the official term, it's called de-dollarization from the United States. Is it clear now? When Saudi Arabia says they're siding with China, it doesn't mean they're ditching oil trade with China. And that local currency swap agreement worth $7 billion is still in place. Saudi Arabia will continue to trade oil with China using a method that doesn't involve the US dollar. That's what de-dollarization means. So even though Saudi Arabia isn't accepting Chinese chips or is rejecting Chinese chips, they're still trading oil with China, which means the relationship between Saudi Arabia and China remains unaffected. It's like singing a song for America, just like Jet Setter. Let me give you a bit more information about the relationship between China and Saudi Arabia. On April 24th, Reuters reported that a company called Aramco, the oil giant from Saudi Arabia, announced it bought shares in a company called Hengli Petrochemical, a Chinese oil giant, up to 10%. If Saudi Arabia wanted to cut ties with China, they wouldn't be doing this. Because when people are about to break up, they don't act like this. Now, you might ask, does America know about this? We know. But the question is America still seeking a mega deal with Saudi Arabia? It's tough because in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is the big player. You have to secure them first. The region is packed with resources, especially oil. If you want to win a war in this world, you have to have a firm grip on the Middle East, especially Saudi Arabia. No matter what it takes, you have to get them on your side, however you can, as much as you can. Saudi Arabia knows this very well. And this year, the United States has an election coming up. The US can't afford to lose Saudi Arabia right now because it would affect America and the election. So in summary, if Saudi Arabia agrees to this mega deal with the United States in order to establish peaceful relations with Israel, but Israel refuses to cooperate, basically saying, I'm not making peace with you, even in that case, Saudi Arabia still stands to gain. Saudi Arabia would become the big winner of the century because they would get access to AI chip technology and more. They would get the most advanced technology in the world from the United States, receive strong military protection from the US, get trade support from the US, and receive support for nuclear energy from the US. And even if they have to give up Chinese chips, they would still be able to trade oil with China without even having to use the US dollar. Because it seems like no one can stop them anyway.